This was H.M.S. Wellington's world, the task for which she was made, to police the British Empire's Pacific dominions. A far cry from the vast grey waters that were to be the setting for her role in the greatest and longest struggle of the Second World War, the Battle of the Atlantic. A battle Britain dare not lose. But the sea she was born to sail was vast enough. Wellington was built as an Imperial patrol sloop, a living embodiment of the famous command, "Send a gunboat." 8 of her class were launched in the 1930s at naval dockyards all around Great Britain, all named after seaports. They were designed to protect Britain's colonies, however far-flung they were, and they were far-flung indeed. Vast too. HMS Wellington had to cover more than 8 million square miles of the Western Pacific, bringing the prestige of the Union flag to islands like the Solomons, the Gilbert and Ellice Islands, and Samoa. But Wellington was meant to be more than that. Alone of her class, she was to be the nucleus of a New Zealand navy. Hence her name, in honour of the country's capital. Hence her roving brief across the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
Well, in these far-flung reaches, the only way you could get around really was by sea. And to maintain any kind of Imperial presence, you needed a ship looking very smart, white hull, yellow funnel, that could come along with a very smart crew, perhaps with some dignitary or other, to make the point that these islands were part of this great global British Empire. Without ships like this maintaining presence, it would have been much more difficult for these islands to have been maintained, and somebody else might have thought, well, perhaps we can maintain order better.
But Wellington, seen here as she is today in Pacific-style livery, was soon to be detached for sterner duties and stormier waters. In 1939, as the Nazi menace darkened over Britain, she was recalled to home waters. She soon found herself in the thick of the action, with a dramatic dash to the French port of Saint-Valery to rescue the 51st Highland Division, fighting a desperate rearguard as the drama of Dunkirk unfolded. Wellington's crew brought off as many soldiers as they could in the ship's boats. A good shepherd indeed. But her wartime flock was to be found in deeper waters, as she took up her task of protecting the Atlantic convoys carrying vital supplies to Britain, no matter what the weather.
Occasionally, we'd feel the deck pressing under our feet as she lifted over a bigger than usual swell. Then it would fall away from under us as she went down the other side. If she was being pushed forward fast enough in bad weather, she could drop over a big wave fast enough to leave her propellers out of the water, and the whine of the turbines would rise to a scream as her screws freewheeled. Then she'd shudder as if she was laughing as they bit into the sea again.
Merchant ships, what they must have gone through is unbelievable. To look through binoculars, looking at them, you know, but just carrying on as they normally do. And the next minute you hear a bang, and that was it. You see a load of smoke going up where one's oil tanker's going up or something like that. A little bit of a sickening feeling you used to get, you know. But you got so used to it then, you see.
Wellington was typical of the unspectacular way in which the escort forces of the Royal Navy carried out their function. And their primary function was the safe and timely arrival of the convoy. If you could sink U-boats, well and good, fine. But the main task was to get the ships through. What we tend to forget is that most convoys in the Second World War were not attacked. They were routed round known threats. The numbers of ships lost by convoys escorted by Wellington was very, very small, and that was a great success, but a success that tends to be unsung because it's not spectacular.
From the very beginning of the war, Wellington was a ship in flux, speedily adapted to her anti-submarine role and swiftly equipped and re-equipped with the means to deal with the U-boats hunting the Allied convoys.
She was first fitted with radar, then she was fitted with better radar, the so-called centimetric radar, that can actually see something like a U-boat's conning tower on the surface at night. She lost her rather old-fashioned anti-aircraft gun and got a weapon called Hedgehog, which was a kind of mortar, a spigot mortar, which fired bombs ahead of the ship. And then, of course, the number of her depth charges was greatly increased. She was designed originally for 40 depth charges, and that was a lot by the standards of the 1930s. By 1943, depth charges were being fired in tens, and so her depth charge capacity had to be very significantly enhanced as well. By 1943-44, Wellington was transformed into a first-class anti-submarine asset.
It was in that convoy duty that Wellington excelled. In 6 years of war, she steamed 250,000 miles, escorting over 100 convoys in the western approaches of the Atlantic and further east on the coast of Africa, as well as in the Mediterranean. Steaming for hour after hour through seas foul and fair, she and her sisters set to in the face of the U-boat threat and knew what to do when it came to an attack, as Wellington veteran Griff Williams remembers.
On the Wellington, it was full ahead, both engines. She'd be at action stations now and battened down. The first depth charge from the rails would roll over the stern, released by the levers up on the bridge. The next one would roll off a few seconds later. Before the final charge was dropped, the first one would be exploding. The ship would jump like she'd been kicked up the backside. To those sealed below deck, each explosion sounded like a mass of sledgehammers pounding on the ship's side.
Hedgehog, even more lethal to U-boats, hurled circles of mortar bombs into the sea ahead of the ship. That was a task for Peter Gibbs, then a 20-year-old able seaman.
One of my main jobs was the Hedgehog, right on the front of there, right where the 3-inch gun used to be. They'd done away with the 3-inch and you fire them straight off.
With good effect, too. Here, Wellington can be seen in the distance after her Hedgehog attack forced a German U-boat to the surface. Wellington's work as Good Shepherd wasn't just about defeating attackers. She also rescued survivors, 450 in all. Among them, those saved from the passenger ship Highland Patriot. 3 of the Patriot's crew were lost in the attack, but Wellington saved the rest. The sloop became a family ship, with scores of men, women and children all squeezed on board to be taken to safety. It's a very different scene below decks today. But then the mess decks were given over to the survivors, who returned the kindness by preparing meals for the crew and doing the washing up. For the youngsters, it was one big adventure, dressing in sailors' uniforms, steering the ship, even startling lookouts by suddenly appearing in the crow's nests.
I think your seaman's mess deck was,
That's right, yes.
which would have been up here.
That's it.
But these were not the only survivors rescued, as Griff Williams recalls.
No survivors ever died because H.M.S. Wellington was too afraid to pick them up.
Ships like Wellington were the best escorts in many ways that the Royal Navy had, and they were crucial to winning the Battle of the Atlantic. There were many merchant ships, I think, that survived World War II because of the escort of this sloop.
Wellington is still on active service, as home to the Honourable Company of Master Mariners, and the setting for their ceremonial events.
Master, I present Captain Patrick Evans and Captain Giles Wade for admission to the livery.
From here, the wealth of maritime experience embodied in the company is put to good use, promoting and encouraging seafaring standards. The ship herself is under the ownership of the Wellington Trust. They preserve and maintain her as a heritage ship to educate the nation about the history of the British Merchant Navy and the importance today of the ships and people who cross the ocean to bring us all we need. And for those who served in her during the perilous years, she has left one more lasting legacy.
H.M.S. Wellington. She had taken us as boys and made us into men.